thought? Who would have thought that we would get to this place? The Zack Snyder Justice League is officially a thing. I avoided talking about the Justice League on here because I didn't really have much to say, and a lot of people were so upset about the original version, and the relentless hashtags that I saw on social media, release the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut. And I kept saying to those people, give it up. It's not gonna happen. Lo and behold, last year, Zack Snyder officially announces it's coming. Warner Brothers officially greenlit it, and HBO Max gives him permission to release it. And now here we are, and we finally have the Justice League, Snyder Cut. If I sound off, I apologize. I have huge allergies right now. Oh, God. Springtime really kicks your butt. I'll try to power through this as best as I can and hopefully not lose any momentum. And I'm not going to talk about everything, but I am going to go into certain details about this movie. So if you don't want to know anything, don't watch the video. Long story short, the DCEU hasn't really done it for me, necessarily. Minus the first Wonder Woman and Shazam, and maybe a little bit of Wonder Woman 84. I'll save that for a later video. I didn't really like Man of Steel. Batman v Superman, I hated it. Suicide Squad, I really did not like that one at all. Aquaman, I still have yet to see. The reason I have avoided it for a while is because I thought it looked really corny and really just, God, no. Maybe I'll give it a try at some point soon, but right now, not interested. And the theatrical cut of the Justice League, or the Justice League as people call it, which I think is kind of stupid, but I find myself saying that too. It's not something that I despise, but what a disaster. And I haven't even bothered to go back and see it since then. Other people have said it, so there's really no need to go into it. But the one moment that really stuck out to me was that I could clearly tell that it was a Joss Whedon moment, was the Lasso of Truth scene where Aquaman starts to talk about how insecure he feels and how he calls Wonder Woman hot. And Bruce kind of goes, Arthur? And then the camera zooms out and you see the Lasso of Truth, and I laughed, but at the same time I thought, that's a Joss Whedon moment. And obviously the fake mustache that people have freaked out about, I didn't really notice it, so I didn't really see what the big deal of that was. And a lot of that was because Henry Cavill was filming with Tom Cruise on Mission Impossible at the time, so he couldn't shave his mustache. It's a mustache. What do you care? If it really sticks out to you, then that's your problem. I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just saying I didn't have a problem with it. Fast forward to 3.5 years later, we have the Snyder Cut. I'm with the consensus in one specific way that this is a huge improvement over the Joss Whedon cut. This being on streaming, you obviously have a lot more time to delve into things, explore the characters. We get a lot more of Cyborg, we get more of Aquaman's story, as well as The Flash. Batman and Wonder Woman, not so much. There might be a couple of extra additions, but the role in here is about the same as it was in the theatrical edition. Similar to J.K. Simmons' Gordon, which I thought was a really good choice, and I would like to see more of him, hopefully, if we get more in this version. Steppenwolf in the theatrical edition was, I thought, the biggest generic bad guy that I had ever seen in a long time. Although he was nothing compared to Dr. Doom and Van Forstick. Ugh. This time around, his motivations are more clear. He's after the 3 boxes that he wants to acquire for Darkseid, and that's the basic MacGuffin that the Justice League has to acquire and destroy before Steppenwolf can accomplish his mission. Similar to the Tesseract with Loki and the Avengers. I'm not trying to compare, I'm just saying I noticed the parallels. That and also Steppenwolf kind of sounds like Josh Brolin as Thanos. Darkseid doesn't really have anything to do here, and I think it's pretty clear that they were setting him up to be the big bad guy should they have followed through on making this like a trilogy or a quadrilogy. Whether or not we will get a sequel to Zack Snyder's Justice League, that remains to be seen. But I do really like how Zack Snyder finally got his chance to show what he wanted to show to people had he gotten to release it in theaters. Now this is very long, it's about 4 hours, and had this been theatrically released, I think you would have seen something like an Avengers Endgame runtime, like 3 hours or something, which I honestly think would have been fine because all the problems that I had with some of the characterizations aside, more or less the same as they were in the previous movies, but the biggest problem I have with this movie, it's the pacing. It is way too drawn out. That opening scene, it felt like it went on for 15 minutes. It didn't go on for 15 minutes, but it felt like it went on that long. It just kept going and going and going and going, and there's plenty of moments where that happens, like the battle on Themyscira, which is a bit more exciting, to be honest, but at the same time, Zack Snyder, I think, gets a little too indulgent on showing all these cool visuals. And that's the thing that I've heard people criticize him for, that he tends to rely on style and not so much on substance. I don't mean anything against him personally. I haven't really seen a whole ton of his movies. And for all intents and purposes, I think he comes off as a nice guy from the interviews I've seen him do. As far as the tragedy with his daughter, man. Zach, if somehow you're watching this, I am truly, truly sorry for that you had to go through that. I don't think anybody would really blame him for leaving when he did. Seeing how Warner Brothers and Joss Whedon handled the theatrical edition, even if you don't like this movie, you gotta admit, that was a pretty low thing to do. But it also carries into Cyborg's backstory with the visuals and the style. We see a little bit of that when we see young Victor playing on the football field for the Gotham City high school football team, which was cool that we finally got to see his backstory, and he really is the heart and soul of this movie. Cyborg, played by Ray Fisher, he brings a lot of heart and nuance to the character, which we kind of saw a little bit in the theatrical edition, but that was unfortunately thrown to the wayside. And I think his arc is fairly well realized, where he finally comes to terms with who he is and who he wants to be, that he's not broken, that he's not alone, that he has friends that he can rely on. It's nothing new necessarily, but in this situation, I thought it was fairly effective. And I like that his father is played by Joe Morton, who is Miles Dyson in Terminator. I just find that kind of interesting that he creates Skynet, basically, and he creates another cyborg in this one. Jason Momoa as Aquaman has a little bit more to do, and the lasso of truth moment with him, gone. And the scene where he meets up with Bruce in the bar somewhere in Finland or the Scandinavian region, a bit more drawn out, and it doesn't feel Guardians of the Galaxy-esque. It feels a bit more in line with Zack Snyder's vision, and we get a bit more of why he feels resentful towards Atlantis and his Atlantean heritage, which I guess has something to do with the fact that he's half human. It's either his mom or dad that's a human. I can't remember. I don't know the comics, so please politely correct me if I'm wrong. And we get a scene with him and Willem Dafoe, who was cast as one of his advisors, I suppose. He was nowhere to be seen in the theatrical edition, but finally, Willem Dafoe has something to do here. A lot of the actors and acting, it's basically what you expect to see in a Zack Snyder movie. It's pretty standard and basic for me. They're basically here to show off these cool stunts and choreography and these big epic shots that we see in these battle scenes, like what Zack Snyder showed off in the movie 300. Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, I think, is the best part of the DCEU. Wonder Woman doesn't really have that much to do, besides the cool, badass action scenes, which she really, really shows how capable she is. Like, particularly that robbery scene where we see her reintroduced. And that scene is a bit more drawn out, like I mentioned, but I think for a purpose. In the theatrical edition, from what I remember, it was very quick, and we didn't really feel like there was enough time to breathe and see what was actually happening. This time we actually see in detail all these really cool moves that she does, and I gotta admit, whenever she does this, I end up doing that too. And I'm starting to like the Wonder Woman theme a little bit. I didn't love it at first in Dawn of Justice, but now I think it's kind of growing on me. But what she really has to do here, outside of the action, basically give off a lot of exposition historically, talking about the 3 boxes that Darkseid and Steppenwolf are trying to get their hands on, and that there was a big battle on Earth several thousand years ago. That's really all she has to do. But for what it's worth, I still think that she gives it her all. As for Batman, not that much difference. I guess the only thing that we see as far as a new edition goes is this new piece of tech that Alfred creates for Batman's arsenal. And I gotta admit, Ben Affleck as Batman, he's just not doing it for me. He's fine. He's fine. He's not awful, but I feel like we don't really get that deep into Bruce Wayne's head. Ben Affleck, he's a bit more tolerable in this version, as opposed to the theatrical edition where I thought Ben Affleck had just given up entirely. In this version, on my end, he seems to put a little bit more of an effort into playing this character. And Batman, when he's in the Batwing, the bat crawler in the sewer or whatever, or in the Batmobile at the climax of the movie, took me right back to Batman Arkham Knight when he's in the Batmobile.
Like I said, very cool stuff.
I do like Jeremy Irons as Alfred, even though I wish we had more of him, just like J.K. Simmons as Gordon. As for Superman's role, it's more or less the same in this version. We don't get the post-credit scene where we see him and the Flash take off for a race, and we don't see the end result of it, kind of like the end of Rocky 3. He sticks with the black suit this time around, though, as opposed to his traditional look. Even though I think Henry Cavill is a really solid choice, he's not really given a whole lot to work with here as far as like what his character actually feels in here and in here. There's so many missed opportunities throughout this franchise where maybe we could actually get inside his head and see just how he feels about his powers. And now that he has this new black suit and we hear that inner monologue, it finally could have been an opportunity for us to get inside Superman's head a little bit, but we don't really get that. And once again, just one thing that they could have used to just give us something to go on with this character, and WB just throws it all out the window. That being said, when Superman is kicking butt with the rest of the Justice League, that's really cool stuff. I really like seeing him do that. Punching Steppenwolf into the ground with the laser eyes. I really like seeing that stuff. Oh, and as opposed to the theatrical edition, we don't get a daytime sequence where it's all overly saturated in orange and red. It takes place during the nighttime, and we don't get that stupid subplot with the family living in the middle of no man's land in Russia, and the Flash is basically trying to push them out. They actually give him more to do, traveling at supersonic speed to try to sync up with Cyborg and the 3 boxes in order to destroy them. And by the way, Ezra Miller as the Flash, I'm not a fan. He's a little more toned down in this version, thankfully, and the introduction with him and Bruce Wayne is a bit more or less the same. That seems like an oversimplification. I need friends. Good God, dude, stop talking. But I do like the moments that he gets with his father when he visits him in prison. That actually makes the character a bit more grounded for me. And that's mostly because I know the backstory of The Flash, having watched the first 2 seasons of the television show on CW. And I like seeing him reverse time when everything seems to be lost. The way his character ends, I like how it sets up his solo movie, which I suppose is going to be directed by Robert Zemeckis, who has a thing for time travel, obviously. And as far as the future for Zack Snyder's vision, I don't know if we're going to see it. I keep hearing that it could happen, but it might not happen, especially with Warner Brothers going forward with a different direction, having a different version of Batman, and a reboot of Superman supposedly happening, I guess. Wonder Woman 3 is coming at some point, Shazam, and so on and so forth. But if fans manage to convince Warner Brothers to release this version, who's to say they can't do the same thing with the sequel? And apparently Zack Snyder is certainly open to doing another one, because the way they leave this off with the reveal of Martian Manhunter talking with Bruce Wayne at his mansion, saying that Darkseid has got other plans, I kind of do want to see what Zack Snyder would have done, but I'm not going to be surprised if it doesn't happen. And it's weird that it turned out this way, because Warner Brothers historically has the worst habit of getting their hands in production so much. Not all the time though, like with the Dark Knight trilogy or Wonder Woman, but in various movies that we've seen, it's pretty clear that they don't really know how to do this correctly. I know a lot of people give Marvel crap, and I think that's a bit unwarranted in a lot of respects, but it was pretty clear when they announced the Justice League and Batman v Superman that they were trying to copy Marvel. Obviously, Hollywood likes to recreate the success that it does in some way, but the fact that they listen to fans so much, it should be this way, it should be that way, Marvel at least hasn't done that. They do give the fans what they want, but they also stick to their guns and go in the direction that they want to, while giving something for the fans to appreciate, and for general audiences. That's something that Warner Brothers could have done at the very least, or it's something similar to it. You didn't have to be an exact copy and paste of Marvel, but you could have followed their playbook in a similar fashion, even if you have a few bumps along the way. Because Marvel's Phase 1, that was a little bit rocky. It only took about 5 to 7 years for them to finally get their rhythm going. Could we still see that in Zack Snyder's version? I don't know, but I do like that we got to see his vision, because it's at least consistent with what he set up in the previous movies. You pretty much know what you're gonna get, so just stick with the tone. And I think had this been the version that was released a few years ago, albeit a little bit trimmed down to like 3 hours maybe, I think this would have gone a whole lot better, and we probably would have seen a Justice League 2 or 3 even, who knows? There's really no way to know. But it is kind of interesting to talk about, but nevertheless, it is really fascinating to talk about. From a technical standpoint, visuals, CGI, music, sound design, all of it's top-notch. I like the 3:4 aspect ratio, which makes it feel like you're watching it on cable TV. So, in conclusion, the Justice League Snyder Cut, not something that I love and would want to watch over and over again, but it's a million times better than what we saw in theaters from Joss Whedon. If anything, I'm really glad to see that Zack Snyder got a chance to show his vision in some capacity, even if it was on streaming, which in this case I would agree is probably a better option. If you're a fan of Zack Snyder's movies and the DCEU, you're gonna have a great time with this one. And going forward, if they give us a sequel to the Snyder Cut, I do hope it works out for the best. Those are my thoughts on the Snyder Cut. What are your guys' thoughts on the movie? Comment below and tell me, and I'll see you guys in the next video.